What's up, pod pals? It's your buddy Adam, and you are checking out Podcasting Business School. This is the show where I teach podcasters how to love their podcast like a hobby and build it like a business. And I'll go ahead and say it. Today's guest is someone I'm so excited about. I may have never had a better fit for this show in that guest seat than Ina Coveney. She is all about making money with a small, not just a small, a tiny audience. And that's an obstacle that exists for a lot of podcasters. Like, I don't have enough people, bro. I can't make the monies because I don't have the peoples. And Ina solves this problem for people. I love her Instagram content. I'm obsessed with it. She's got a great podcast. So I think that this episode is really going to serve you in a way that you've never been served before, Pod Pal. So let's get ready to dig in with Ina. Ina, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I love that introduction. Yes, tiny audiences is my thing, and you'll find out why very soon, but it makes me laugh. But yes, tiny audiences. Let's do this.
Okay, well, first things first, how do you define a tiny audience? Like what does that mean exactly? Because, I know what my listeners are thinking, like, this lady's gonna come on here and talk about tiny audiences, and she's gonna be like, anything less than 1 million people or something like that. Like, what is a tiny audience defined by Ina?
Under 500,000 downloads would be no. I'm talking tiny. I'm talking like, if you want a number, definitely fewer than 1,000 people. So fewer than 1,000 followers on Instagram, fewer than 1,000 subscribers to your mailing list, fewer than 1,000 downloads in your podcast. 1,000 is a good number, but I am talking like immediate network kind of tiny audience.
Yeah, and the people that are into your stuff, that they listen to your podcast, they engage with you. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
It's not that many. Like those are my people. People are like, oh, but I don't have the numbers to go out for the big sponsorship deals. Like, I need to grow it before I can start monetizing. And I'm like, you don't. So that's my world.
All right, well, let's talk about how you figured this out, because obviously this is a really great niche and you're helping a lot of people with your content. So, like, how did you become the tiny audience monetization woman and an expert in this space?
Apparently, it's because I suck at growing my audience. That is why. Like, I wish I could come here and tell you, oh, I figured this out on the first day and I realized I don't need to grow my audience. Like, I wish I had a big audience. I want 100,000 followers and subscribers tomorrow, like everybody else. But here's what happened. I fell for exactly the same thing that we all do. I'm a business coach, right? That's my world. My world is, I'm a business coach. And I fell for the same thing that everybody does, which is, hey, the glitz and glamour and the money and everything is in growing your audience, right? You gotta go viral. You gotta get yourself on YouTube because it's a search engine. You gotta get yourself on Pinterest. Same reason. You gotta get yourself on Reels and TikTok because that's where the growth is right now, everybody, if you've been living under a rock. And I fell for all of it. And I bought so many courses and I worked with so many coaches that I got myself into so much debt. And at the end of like 3 years of just like investing myself into a hole, I was like, my audience is still not any bigger. Like, I feel like I'm doing all the right things. I feel like I'm pretty smart. Like, my audience is just not there. But there's one thing that was happening at the same time. And that is that I never actually stopped growing my business. I had, the biggest year in terms of revenue that I had ever had in 2020, but I was deep in a hole of debt because of this shiny object syndrome that is called audience growth. So I'm like, this doesn't make any sense that I'm still investing tens of thousands of dollars trying to grow an audience when on the other side, I am making tens of thousands of dollars with the audience that I already have. Like, something didn't compute here. So I'm like, okay, what if? And this was like me being completely angry at myself. This was at the end of 2020, just angry at myself for seeing this disparity. I'm like, I am making money. My audience is not that big. And I'm still trying to chase that audience growth and putting money into it. So I'm like, what should I do? I'm like, okay, I'm angry at my decisions. I'm going to do everything differently this year. So in 2021, I went from, the past 3 years where I was just in the deep in the negative by tens of thousands of dollars to turning a page and saying, no more. I'm actually just going to focus on making money, on monetizing the audience that I already have. I am done investing in everything that is telling me that it's going to work and I just want for me. And I went to 30% profitability in 2021. So
Nice.
I'm like, you know what? Like I'm done. I'm done. So that's what I go out and I evangelize now, is that if that is you, if you're still chasing that audience growth factor and things are still like not working, I invite you to come into my world where you already have an audience that would buy from you. You're just not banking on it.
Wow. I think that audience growth, like there's a strong tie to ego, and that's the issue where we have that imposter syndrome and all those things wrapped into one. So I love what you're doing. The word evangelize fits you very, very well. I'm like, this woman is leading the charge in this space of, like, on your Instagram, you attended one of my recent Pod Pal Zoom parties. I'm like, you got to check out Ina's Instagram because it seems like she's purposely trying to keep it under 1,000 followers. And like you celebrated, you're like, you have 1,000 real people that you have interacted with. You were taking people off that were potentially bots or whatever. But I think that it's so the opposite of what everyone else is doing, where they're buying followers just to say, like, look, I've got 30,000 followers and no one ever comments.
Yeah. I
Weird.
and I love that you put it that way. Like when we were in your podcasting party, you put it that way. She's intentionally trying to keep her followers down, and I'm like, you know what? Nobody had ever put it that way. I had never put it that way. What I was trying was not to keep my followers down, but to keep my followers uh, real, right? Like that.
Yeah.
That was the point. That what is the I could come here and tell you I grew my audience to 2,000 people in 4 months. Like, why? What would that do for me? Like, unless the number is like 100,000, it's not even that impressive. So why am I trying to hang on to accounts that are just going to do nothing for me other than skew my own numbers? And the reason I did this, and let me actually backtrack and explain a little bit what Adam is talking about, and it's the fact that I audit my followers list on Instagram. I started a brand new account. I started from scratch. I did not do an audit on an old account where I sifted through 1,000 accounts. I created a brand new account in June of 2021. Wow. Yeah. June of 2021. And I decided that there was absolutely no point in keeping people that were not going to be my people. And that didn't necessarily mean just ideal clients, because you got to keep an open mind. It is possible that there is a housewife who lives down the street from me right here in the Boston area who is thinking about starting a business, and she resonated with my account. She's allowed to stay. Like, just because she's not a business owner, like not my ICA, not my ideal client avatar, doesn't mean that I'm going to remove her. So the goal became, if it's not a real person, then they're out. It could be a great mentor, it could be a great collaborator. Like, keep an open mind of who that person could be. The one kind of real person that I don't keep, though, is men who don't have a business, because then they don't have any business following me, because I am done with dudes looking for love in the wrong places. So they just get removed automatically. But the idea was, I just want to talk to real people, to have the opportunity to engage with real people, and it helped me in my numbers in my head, right? Because if I'm here thinking, oh, 100 people viewed my stories, like a couple weeks ago I had like 115 people view one of my stories. I'm like, that's over 10% of my population. But if my population was 30% bots, then what does that number actually mean?
Right.
For my conversion rates, for my visibility rates? Like, I want my visibility rates to be real. So I did it for me. And I can keep talking about this, is I'm going to monopolize the conversation on this one topic, but that's why I was doing it.
Well, I love it. And that's when I had you on Pod Pals, I'm like, you got to come on the show. Like, it's got to happen because just I like the way that you show up. And I love it when like you're an influencer, like I'll call you that. And like I love it when influencers do it with heart and they give people hope. Like I try to do the same thing in the podcasting space where I talk about real numbers. I'm like, I'm not gonna lie. Like one of the biggest things in podcasting is to lie about your numbers. I'm doing 1 million per episode and blah, blah, blah. And I've called myself out before. I went to my college, my high school 20-year reunion a few years back, and somebody asked me how many downloads my show had done. I'm like, oh, it's done 1 million. And I caught myself in the line, like, hold on, pump my brakes. It's not 100,000. I told them, I was like, wait a second, that's not true. I did.
Yeah.
It's like I had to catch myself because it's so easy to just do that. And
Yeah.
the way that you show up, it gives people hope. You're like, all right, this woman's out there. She's doing 6 figures with 1,000 people on Instagram, and she's got a smaller audience, and she's showing people how to duplicate that. So instead of being embarrassed of that, you're owning it and making it your thing. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah. And there's just, and business wise, it is a, is such a large market out there. Like if I can put it in those terms, there are so many people out there in the same position that I'm in. So I see a lot of coaches who, because the glitzy and the glamorous thing is audience growth, and for some people it works. By the way, I know somebody personally who started at the same time as me. We both had like 400 followers on each of our accounts, and 6 months later she had 40,000 followers. Okay. And it's all based on like reels. Like, and she's like, and if you ask her, what are you doing that I'm not? She would not be able to tell you. She's just going to like, I I don't, I've been consistent. I'm like, I've been doing reels every day for months. Like, so that's not it. Well, the message is, yeah, well, you know what? The audience is different. The message is different. The mainstream factor of what we talk about is different. Like everything is different, but it's not like there's a formula that if you apply it, you are going to have, I mean, like, who cares? 80%, 90% of people who buy these courses, who consume this information, do not get that kind of results. So what happens to them? Right? We only talk about the big testimonials. Like, look at my client who just got grew to 20,000 followers in 3 months. Like, that's great. What about the other 9,000 people who have been trying to grow their audience and it's not working for them? Does that mean that they should give up? And I'm like, I'm not planning on giving up anytime soon. So I'm here to kind of like to let them know, like, it's okay to not have a big audience. There are things that we can do to monetize it. So uh, it, I, it was funny because I just gave a presentation about this to something called Pod Talks. It's like TED Talks, but for podcasters. And the first thing that I said was, I'm about to tell you something that no other podcaster in this entire lineup is going to tell you. And actually, I'm afraid that as soon as I tell you, they're going to want to pull my presentation from this. And that is that I don't even have 1,000 subscribers on my podcast. Like everybody else can say whatever they want, but like I just don't. And there's absolutely no reason why somebody like me with a small audience, like not doing all those big things, there's no reason why I should be occupying this spot right now, other than to tell you that you could do it too. And that's basically it. It's about that hope.
I love it. And obviously, I think what you're doing is brilliant. And I want to kind of showcase that a little bit. I love to talk tactics on this show, and I can't let you pass through here without getting like, let's get into it a little bit because I'm obsessed with your Instagram stories and you bring up these topics. I'm like, yes, this is, I need her to talk about this. So one of the things like in the example in the podcasting space, there are a lot of like, I'll call them old school podcasters that are teaching people about podcasting, but it's kind of what worked for them 10 years ago. And that's not what's working now. So what do you think is existing out there? There are all sorts of influencers and coaches like in the business and growth space. What is different? Like when you have like what works for somebody with a giant audience that doesn't work for somebody it has a smaller audience. So what are people out there teaching that won't necessarily work for somebody with a smaller audience? Let's maybe start there.
Okay, pretty much everything. Because pretty much everything that you have seen, because you go and you study people, right? Like when we watch other influencers, we're studying what they're doing. So we may look at somebody who's larger than life, right? Like a Joe Rogan, right? And we might want to listen to their podcast and study. Okay, how is he doing the interviews? Well, like, what is so special? Trying to like dissect what that makes this podcast so unique. What is it that I could start mimicking, right? That's how we start because that's how we learn is by watching other people. Here's the thing: that the people that we watch are the people who have bubbled to the top. Okay, there are hundreds of thousands. I don't know, did we cross a million active podcasts out there yet? I feel like a couple of years ago it was like everybody was talking about 800,000. Like, I don't know if we've reached that level yet, but the big ones that flow to the top are the ones that have gotten the big audience. And I want you to notice that. I want you to notice as soon as you start following someone, the moment you catch yourself thinking, oh, that person was an overnight success because I didn't know about them yesterday and I do now, I want you to challenge that assumption for yourself and to go and Google them and check what were they doing before the podcast launched.
Yeah.
Did they have a background in broadcasting? Did they have a background in marketing? Did they already have a successful business? Did they already have a following on something else, maybe a clothing line that they were doing, right? People don't just pop out of nowhere, but we keep thinking that. We keep thinking that this is just like a get rich overnight kind of scheme that we can just bank it if we just got the right strategy. So I would say that pretty much everything that you see the big people do are things that you're going to get to do when you get to that level. But it's not the thing that is going to work necessarily for you. So, for example, if you're listening to a big podcast and they say, come and join us in our next summit, where we're going to have, Adam Shively, and we're going to have Ina Coveney, and we're going to have Lewis House, right? That's the lineup of the summit right
That's
there.
a good lineup.
That's like it's a great lineup. I would go. So this is our summit. So go to signupformysummit.com and go and buy your ticket. And then you go to that link and they're selling tickets for like $250 all the way to VIP, which is $700 for you to attend this like virtual summit, right? That, for instance, it's not going to be a winning strategy for you with a small audience to monetize, because that is banking on there's millions of people who are listening to this. So if we play the rules of conversions online, 1% will actually go and take action on that. And with that mere 1%, they can pay their speakers. With a small audience, you may be thinking, well, if they're doing events, maybe I should do an event. Good luck with that, right? What you should be thinking about is how are you going to engage people and bring them to the front row. This is how I picture the whole thing. Is if I'm a podcaster, I picture myself on a stage, right? And I imagine that there's a stadium in front of me, right? But it's dark. I can't see anyone. So if somebody throws me on a stage and everything is dark because I'm the one who's lit up that has the spotlight on, and I know that I'm in a 5,000 person stadium, right? And I say, hey, you guys need to buy my stuff. Okay, go to this link. And then they turn on the lights. And I notice that it's like, okay, I thought there were 5,000 people, like your 5,000 downloads, for example, but really there were only 30 people that were actually active, that were actually captive and listening and going to that website. What are you going to do? Are you going to continue to speak from the stage and pretending that you have 5,000 people listening to you? Or are you going to turn on the house lights and bring those 30 people to the front and tell them, you guys, way too big a space, come. You get off of the stage and you go and talk to them personally. Hi, my name is Ina. How are you doing? Why are you listening to this podcast? So that is what we need to be doing as podcasters with a small audience, is stop pretending that your download numbers equal people sitting in a stadium hanging on to your every word, because they're not. 30 people at most of those 5,000 might even be actually listening and care enough to go to that website that you're giving them. So what can you do to get down like in the mud with them and talk to them? I can promise you right now that none of us, not anybody who's listening to this, has ever had a nice, long, amazing DM conversation with Joe Rogan. I mean, I'm gonna guess that Joe Rogan is not sitting there in his DMs asking people, so what was your favorite episode? Right? So these are things that you're never going to see a big podcaster do is say, hey, by the way, send me a DM and tell me what you liked about this episode. That's something you're never going to hear in a big podcast. But if I want to get those 30 people to come to the front, I'm probably going to do something like that. Hey, by the way, did you know that I don't have an assistant manning my DMs? And if you send me a DM, I will respond. Go ahead and send me a DM today and let's see what happens, right? And then you can start talking to your people. What some other people do is create a Facebook group, right? Facebook groups are amazing. Number one, it's free. Number two, people are already on Facebook. So if they're listening to your podcast and they know that you have a community where you can give special gifts to them, right? Invite them to the Facebook group. And guess what? As soon as they join, you know that they are podcast listeners. Because that's the biggest challenge. It's like, Ina, but how do I know who those 30 people are? All I get is a number and a stat. Invite them somewhere. Invite them somewhere, entice them with something that is really juicy. Most times, just telling them, hey, if you DM me, I'm going to DM you back. Hey, by the way, if you DM me with what you thought of this episode, I'll screenshot it and I'll tag you on it. Would you like that visibility to my audience? Come on, let's do it. So there's a completely different set of strategies with a small audience that you could be doing to start engaging with your people that have nothing to do with what Joe Rogan and the Lewis houses of the world are doing.
All right. So I'm making mental notes and I'm going, all right, step one, we have to acknowledge that our audience isn't as large as we would like. We have to check our ego at the door and go, all right, how do I actually get to interact with these people and take advantage of having a smaller audience, but building super fans along the way? And this is the exact thing that I've done where I'm like, all right, I'm not Joe Rogan, but what advantage does that give me? I can actually talk to these people. I can create relationships. I can create friendships. I can create super fans. I can create real lasting connections. And I didn't have a timeline or a deadline of like, I have to do this by March, whatever. Or, I was like, I'm just going to put in work and keep showing up for these people. They'll keep showing up for me and the audience will grow with super fans. So yeah, I mean, this really resonates with how I've built my audience with Podcasting Business School. Like, I know people, I know where they're from, and I know like about their kids, and we're DMing back and forth. I always tell people, DM me, I'll send you a voice DM back, so you know it's me, you know it's not a VA, and you know it's not a bot or whatever. And people freak out. Like, how weird of a society do we live in when somebody freaks out because you send them a voice text?
Yes.
Like, wow, you took the time to voice text me? That's crazy, man. Like, that's weird, right?
No, and that's what you can do. And I think that you actually, Adam, do it brilliantly. Because when I saw that you had like podcast networking parties, like free podcasting parties, like let's just get together on Zoom and get to know each other and network. I didn't know what to expect when I went to your Zoom party. By the way, can you plug it right now? Where should people go if they're interested in joining one of them?
Yeah, podcastingbusiness.school. PodPal Zoom party. Let's go.
So I had no idea what to expect. I went there. I'm like, this seems like a cool thing to do. And because I'm all about engagement, right? I'm like, let's go and meet some new people. And I love that you had an opportunity for everybody to go like, hey, if you guys need services, if you want to talk about what is it that you have going on, who do you need, what guests do you need, what podcasts are you looking to be featured, everybody just introduce yourselves and go ahead. I created some amazing connections from that party. One person even applied to become my podcasting editor. And I'm like, amazing. We had an interview after. I mean, it was great. And we got to connect and now we're here. So you are doing it brilliantly, which is like not pretending that it's like, okay, just because I have all these tens of thousands, 100,000 downloads, that 100,000 people are going to show up to my party. No, because you know that there's a certain percentage that are really captive listeners and they're going to show up, and these are going to be your people. So I think you do that brilliantly. Everybody should make note of that.
Well, thank you, Ina. I want to recap something that you touched on a minute ago because it's really important. And that is when you do have a smaller audience, you can't put offers out there that are volume dependent of like you said, an event, even a lot of, like memberships and group. You can't have a $7 a month membership and have one person or three people. Like, I've been there, done that. That was my very first thing I ever put out with my health podcast. I created a $7 a month membership. It was like month 3 of being in a podcaster. I had no idea what I was doing. This is back in 2015.
Yeah.
I spent all this money on a platform. I filmed all the videos. I had 6 months of content banked for this membership.
Oh,
$7. I'm like, thousands of people will sign up for this.
um,
And my mom didn't even sign up for it. That's how good it was.
come on,
Uh,
mom.
so like, what are you seeing out there in the tidy audience space offer wise? Like, where should people think about starting, especially if they have programs, products, and services that they can offer specifically? Where's the like the best place to start off making some money and eventually build to 6 figures?
The first thing is to get to know who those audience members are. You're, again, don't sell to just an empty stadium. You got to know who those people are. So when I sell, I'm telling you, like, my podcast really serves as an authority builder for what I do. Like, I want people to see me right next to Pat Flynn, next to John Lee Dumas, next to Laura Belgray. Like, I want them to see me talking to people who are big shots in my area. Okay. So when you think your podcast, don't think this is going to be like my soul funnel, right? Like the place where people are going to find me and then I'm going to funnel them to my offers. I need to basically get them from the podcast into a place where I can identify them. Okay. I need to turn on the house lights in this stadium. So in my podcast, I'm gonna tell you right now, the best thing that I can do is just continuously repeat the same website link every single day. Okay. So I think I have two links that I cycle through, two or three links that I cycle through. Okay. One is my freebie. Okay. And this is when I'm literally like not promoting anything at the moment. It's like, here's my freebie, and you're going to hear it in every single episode. You're going to hear, I have 100 engagement post ideas for you. Go and grab them, 100postideas.com. Like, that's what you're going to get. Then I have another one where if I'm opening the cart to my program, it's basically like a reminder for people that, hey, by the way, if you go to getclientsmembership.com, you're going to get to the wait list because we're going to open the cart soon. You're going to make sure you do that. And it's the same ad for like weeks. And then another ad that says, okay, the door is open. Just don't forget it closes on this date. And that's for like a week when I'm actually promoting my program. The rest of the time, again, freebie. But hearing the same thing over and over and over gives your podcast the sense of like permanence, if I can say it that way, a sense that this is an established thing that now it's in your brain, because if you listen to all of my podcast episodes, you'll remember those links. They're very easy links to remember. If you have a bit.ly link, I highly encourage you to go and buy the domain. Okay, get yourself a really easy link. None of my links say my last name because nobody can spell Coveney
You're
for crap,
preaching to the choir.
right? Nobody can spell my name. So I got, my literally for my freebie, 100postideas.com. That's my link. Think of something really, really easy that you can say every single time that is going to get people out of your podcast and into some place where you can turn on the lights and see their faces. So whatever that is, your Facebook group, whatever it is. Once you get them there, I would be promoting very heavily inside the places where they are. So I would be using my Facebook group to continuously do my promotions. I use my Instagram account to do my promotions. Mostly, I'm talking to a lot of people every single day. That is really where the magic happens, is where the personal engagement happens. I have had people that have watched me go through something like this, right? Like have an amazing conversation with Adam, an amazing conversation with Sylvia, and immediately my authority builds. Immediately they come and follow me, but this is no longer I don't know who she is, and I'm still kind of testing the waters. Now it's like, Ina must know what she's talking about if she's here in this podcast, right? So it elevates your authority so much just to have the podcast. So keep telling people about it. Do not bank on these things being quick. Don't say like, okay, I'm going to start the podcast. It's funny because when we start a podcast, we have such a big wall to get over, which is the fact that, starting a podcast is actually not that easy, right?
Right.
Like editing time, editing, editing, right? It's like the bane of our existence, the editing process, right? And I'm guessing people who are starting out, they don't have a podcast editor yet, right? Like they're doing it all themselves. I had a podcast back in 2012. I've been podcasting for so long. I'm like a dinosaur in podcasting years, right? In my first podcast, I was doing all the editing myself, and I was being very nitpicky about it. And I would remove every and and blah, and like, and it would take me like 3 hours to edit like a solo episode. And I can't do this to myself anymore, right? So like the editing process can be so grueling. So we have such a big wall to climb, and plus putting our message out there. People are gonna hear our thoughts. They couldn't hear them before, and now they're going to, and what is going to happen, like everybody's going to think, and like, so when we finally climb over that wall and we put out 3 episodes and we hear crickets, we were like, why isn't everybody just like flocking to this thing? And it makes us quit, right? 80% of podcasts quit after their third episode. Think about that, right? So what you have to do is remember, give yourself a solid year ahead of you of promoting the exact same thing until people start remembering those links instinctively, because they're listening in their car, they're listening in the shower, they're not listening to it on a computer where they're ready to type that link. So it's got to be really, really easy. So I just went all over the world answering your question, but it's about consistency, a simple link, and meeting people online face to face. Like know who they are and actually get to talk to them. That's how you sell.
So when you look at what you're offering, can you go through just like the plate of like what's working well for you? Like obviously there are people out there that they do, one-on-one coaching, consulting, VIP days, memberships. What's really working well offer wise for you with your tiny audience?
So I have a very, very specific offer, and that is a $200 a month membership for coaches who need more help than free stuff is giving them, but they're not quite at the level that they want to invest $5,000 to work one on one with a coach. So we give them, it's a group coaching program where they can get clients. The program is called Get Clients First. It's like, forget about everything else, forget about growing the audience, forget about anything else, just get clients. The reason this has worked, and I'm going to tell you what I'm about to share with you, it might sound small, but in a small audience world, it's almost unheard of. I just launched this membership 3 times in a row with 2 months in between. Okay. I launched it in October. I launched it in November. I launched it again in January for February. No, in February for March joining. 3 times in a row, 2 months apart, hardly growing my audience at all in between launches. And I got 10 people to sign up for that, for a premium level membership, 10 people to sign up in every single launch. Okay. So here's why this is unique is that if you have not really grown your audience, you may think, well, the first time that I launch, I'm really going to catch all of those people who are actively listening or who've been following me for a while. Anybody who wants to sign up is going to sign up then. So if I'm going to launch again in 2 months, you might think to yourself, I need to grow the audience. I can't just launch exactly the same thing to exactly the same people just 2 months apart, like 6 weeks, because there's a period of cart close and everything, like 6 weeks apart. It doesn't make any sense. But it worked for me every single time. And I'm planning my next launch 2 months from now in exactly the same way. Hopefully, like the goal this year for me, it is to continue to grow the audience so that those numbers can get bigger, because obviously I'm not gonna just continue to do things for just 10 signups, 10 signups at a time. So growing the audience is going to be an important thing for me to do now. But what I've done is validated that this is something that people want. So number one, right, that this is something that it wasn't a fluke that it sold the first time. I was able to sell exactly the same thing in exactly the same way again to the same people. Number two, why did it work that it was exactly the same audience? Because the first time you launch, you're creating familiarity with your offer. And there's a big difference, Adam. If I come here and tell you for the first time, hey, I have a membership, it's $200 a month, and it's to get clients first. You want to join it, right? And you're like, yeah, we just met, like chill, right? But if I tell you about it now and I explain it to you, and then you hear about it some more over the next few days, right? Now it starts to get in your head. Then the cart closes and you get that, uh, yeah, I think I can let it go. That's fine. But then you hear about it again. You're like, oh, it's back. Number one, that lets me think, I feel like I've started like 5 lists with my fingers already, and I keep going back number one. You see that it's a serious business. You see that this wasn't just like a one thing that I put out there. Let's see if people do it. Okay, they didn't. Okay, let me just try something else. You see that this is something that is here to stay, that is building on itself, right? And then you hear it a third time where I have way more testimonials now, and you're like, huh, maybe this is what I need right now. Let me check it out. So what's important here is to continue to create the familiarity. So create that link that you want, where you want people to sign up. Offer the same thing over and over again. But I don't want to appear salesy. Then you're not going to sell anything. You gotta, right? I used to tell my husband, like there were months in 2021, there were months where I didn't make any money. And I went to my husband, I'm like, so I didn't make money this month, but I know why. And it's because I didn't sell anything. So you see, when you put yourself in the accountability seat, like realizing that, you know what, if you're not selling something, people are not going to buy it. What are you expecting? That you're just going to show up on your podcast and people are going to be knocking on your door and be like, hey, how do I work with you? That's great. That has happened to me. I cannot build a business just on that alone. I got to be selling what I'm selling. So did I answer your question? Because I feel like I'm going everywhere because there's so much that I can say about monetization of small audiences. I will just continue to go everywhere.
No, you're doing a beautiful job of it. So the next layer of this question that I would like to unpack is I would love for you to paint a picture of your launch process. Like, what are some key ingredients of like, do we need to be going live on Instagram? You mentioned testimonials. Do we do like that webinar thing? And then, so what's your launch recipe look like? I'm very interested in this.
Okay. Oh, I love talking about this. I love talking about launches. Okay. This is actually like what we do inside Get Clients First is I get people into this cadence, right? Into this launch process. So here I'm gonna caveat this first of all. If you look at any big coach's launch and you try to mimic what they do, you're gonna go crazy and you're gonna burn yourself out and you're gonna end up with a list, because I did end up with a list of 87 or so emails, unique emails that you need to write to send to segmented sections of your list. Okay? That's what would happen if you did that. Don't. Okay? Here's the deal. You got to give yourself the permission to experiment a little bit, especially if you're starting out with launches. Okay? Because the first goal is just to get one ideal client to say, this is something that I need. Okay? You just need that one person. All right. So don't go crazy with the launch. You don't need to segment the list and do 87 emails and all of that stuff. All you need is to create a single focal point that you're trying to draw people into. That could be a webinar. That could be a challenge. That could be a live. It could just be a series of videos. It could be a series of blog posts. It could be a blog post. I just need one focal point. I'm going to call it an event. Okay. One focal event that I need to attract my ideal client to. So think of that as the honey. All right.
That's free. That's a free event.
That is free. That is completely free. Okay. Because all I need to know is, hey, this is my way of turning on the lights, right? Is okay, who is listening? Who cares about this? So the wrong way to do it is to create a class about something that you want to teach, but it's only tangentially related to your offer. That is the wrong thing to do. But it's what you want to teach, right? I've seen this many times. I've done this. When I started in my business, my first webinar was 6 ways to make money doing what you love without quitting your job. Do you want to guess what my offer was? You're never going to get it.
I have no idea.
My offer was a course on how to make WordPress websites. Hey, don't laugh at me.
It's a good,
I
it's a
it
solid through line.
it made sense to me at the time. Okay? Like it made sense. You want to make money doing what you love without quitting your job. I'll teach you how to make WordPress sites so that you can make some side money. But as you can see, anybody just reading the title of that webinar would have never guessed that I was a WordPress expert or that they're about to learn how to make it. Like had nothing to do with it. To me, it made perfect sense. So it actually took me a while to figure out, okay, what should be my webinar title that is going to attract the exact person that would sign up for my program. And it's almost like, if you want a little formula, it's almost like take the name of your program and turn it into a class. It's almost like that. Anything you can do to make that as close as possible. So to this day, actually, I've only done this since October. Like I've only launched it 3 times with this name. My class is called Get Clients with a Tiny Audience, right? And the program is called Get Clients First. So I explain to them like, hey, you are my ideal client because you want to get clients with a tiny audience. Therefore, you will want to be in this program because it's for you, right? So that's the first thing. It's like they have to be very, very closely related, because if they're not, like if you're offering something out there and you can't even give it away, what are the chances anybody's going to work with you?
True.
Right? So if you can't, that should be a tip for you. If you can't even give it away, are you talking about the right thing? Are you attracting the right person? Are you even putting it in the right places? So start there, creating that focal point. Give it a date, and then just tell everybody your job right now is not to get every follower to buy from you. That's not your goal. Put away that goal. Just tuck it under something, close it in a book, and then file it away. Your goal is not to get every follower to sign up to work with you. Your goal is to get every single follower to understand what you do. That's it. Okay? If everybody understood what you did, then they can take their sweet time to sign up to work with you. Maybe right now is not the time. Maybe they're too early in their journey. Okay? Your goal is not to sign them up. Goal is to educate them. So what can you do to attract people who are perfect to work with you right now? And that's what you do. And whatever you're able to manage in terms of emails leading up to it and Facebook or Instagram posts leading up to it. And then I do have a very important tip. If you will allow me, if you'll
Of
let me
course.
go for like a couple more minutes on this, this is something that I tell my clients to do. Because especially when you're starting out with launches, after your webinar, your challenge, like that big event is over, you will notice an energy drain. Okay? So this happens to me, it happens to everybody. You'll notice an energy drain because most people are not going to sign up to work with you during the event, during the webinar or during the challenge. Like you might just get like 0 signups, right? And it discourages us because we're human, because we're people, because we just put a whole bunch of work into this and we didn't get any bites. So even though you planned to have an entire week post launch where you were going to follow up with people and see if they wanted to sign up, you're not going to feel like it. The last thing you're going to want to do after nobody signed up for your program in your webinar is to go and keep talking about it. So what I tell my clients to do, and this tip is worth you having listened to me blab for the past hour, okay? What you want to do is write your emails backwards. When you sit down to write the emails for your launch, you're not going to start with the invitations for the webinar. You're going to start with, hey, the cart closed yesterday and you just missed out on this opportunity, but don't worry, here's a wait list so you can sign up for next time. That's going to be the first email you're going to write. And then you're going to write them sequentially, backwards chronologically. Okay? So that way, by the time that your launch is over, those emails are written. And there's nothing that you can do to sabotage your mailing list getting those messages. Level up, by doing the same thing with the posts, posting on Facebook or posting on Instagram, scheduling all those posting events. That tip right there is going to save you from yourself, from the self sabotage that happens after a launch. So that's my little like first timers formula. How do you like it?
I love it. And I saw you mention that tip on Instagram a couple days ago, and I was like, this makes sense because I've done that before where I was like, I mean, the exact thing that you described, it's like my initial foray into trying to make money as a podcaster with my health show. I was like, wow, no one showed up, or people showed up and then no one buyed. Like I said, my mom didn't even buy my first offer. So it's just like, you would definitely get in our head about it. So I think it's brilliant to set yourself up to succeed. And we have to think, like, how often do we personally buy something the very first time that we hear about it, especially if it's over $100, if it's a $3 thing, maybe just a little whim buy. But like when we're talking about building businesses, getting, memberships, consulting, investing, and getting better, usually people think about it a little bit. So I think what you just laid out there, like that's a blueprint, ladies and gentlemen, pod pals that are listening in. And if you only do one thing, look at this, write the last email first and work backwards from there. I think that it's going to be pretty hard to go wrong with that. So,
And by the way, I have signed up for things after the cart closes. Like that person was very, very savvy in that they left a back door open. So after the cart closed, I'm like, I think I would have signed up. So I went back to the sales page just to see, because sometimes they say, oh, we're closing the launch, but they really leave the sales page open.
yeah.
So I went back and I'm like, let me see if it's still open. And it said, sorry, we're closed, but you can get on the wait list here. So I signed up for the wait list. And the first email was, hey, so do you still want this? Because we haven't officially closed it yet, so you can go and sign up in this back door here. So I have signed up for things after the card closes. In fact, in my last launch, one of my members who had joined us before and then she left, she wanted to come back. And on the day that I was opening the program, like this was days after the card closed, she's like, I want to come back. Is this still? I'm like, today's the first day. So like, why not? Any other time I would have said like, no, we already closed and everything. Like, if you join today, you're joining with everybody else. So sure. So people still sign up even after they want to sign up even after cut close, but you have to give them that chance. You can't just like disappear and be like, oh, I guess this just didn't work. Right? Like you gotta give them a chance.
That's brilliant. All right. Now I know we're running short on time, but I got to throw one more question out there because I'm excited to ask this because I know my audience is full of action takers. Like they are people that they're hungry to make a change. I think your message is definitely resonating with them. So what do you think is the most likely next step? If we've got an audience full of people that have tiny but growing audiences, what's the most likely next step that they need to do as soon as they're done listening to this episode? What should they take action on, Ina?
Start talking to people. This is a very easy one. Just start talking to people. Stop thinking of them as a blob of people that are just following you and start seeing them as individuals. And for that, you need to start actually meeting them, knowing their name. Why are they following you? What is their story? What is their background? You need to start doing that. So if it's okay for me to share with them what I have put together is I'm like, okay, we all know that we have to post, right? And like I've talked to people that I ask them, so what do you think you need to do to grow your business? And they're like, I think I need to post more. And I'm like, do you want to give that another shot? Like, is it like what should you be doing? Let's try that again. And he goes, no, I really think I should be posting more. I'm like, okay, fine. So I'm gonna meet you where you're at. If you're thinking like, you know what, I should be posting more, I'm gonna do you one better. I sat down and I wrote down 100 post ideas, but it's not just any idea. This is not a content calendar. These are ideas that are specifically designed to put you in the driver's seat of your engagement numbers. Okay? You're never going to post again and say, but people are not engaging with me. No, you're putting the blame on somebody else. Engagement is what you do, not what other people do. It's not something you wait for. So I put together this guide where literally I wrote each one of these 100 ideas really, really thoughtfully to make sure that you get engagement and that you take action on your engagement. I would write one and then walk away and then come back and write the next one and walk away. That's how thoughtful each of these post ideas are. And everybody can go and get it completely for free at 100postideas.com. That's where I would say you need to start.
Outstanding. 100postideas.com. Go get it. Where else do people come to interact with you and get into your world there, Ina?
Best place is in Instagram. That's where I'm spending all of my time right now. And I'm at Your Engagement Coach.
Nice. And make sure that you are one of her next 1,000 real True Blue followers. Her Instagram is excellent. I can't recommend it any higher. Get in her stories. Just watch what she does. It's just like me. Like I tell people, watch what I do with my show. Watch what I'm doing, how I'm interacting with people. Use that as a blueprint. Copy it. Use it for your own. Same thing with Ina. Like I feel like you coach in a very similar way, where you're like, this is what I do, and this is working for me. It'll probably work for you too. So, Ina, this has been awesome. This has been exactly what I'd hoped for. Like I said, I've been very excited about this conversation. I think you over-delivered. I had high expectations. You over-delivered, and I can't wait to stay connected. And I think that there's some collaboration in the future between Ina and I. I've just got a hunch. So, my friend, I appreciate you taking some time for us here today.
Thank you so much, Adam. This was super fun. I loved your questions. I'm a strategist, so that anything that has to do like meaty tactics, let's get into it. I'm all game. So this was super fun. Thank you so much, Adam.
All right. Pod pals, everybody listening in, we've got plenty of things to think about and take action on. Are you initiating engagement? That's the question I've got for you. Go out, start there, start talking to people like Ina has coached us to do here today. And as always, I'm going to send you out into the wilderness, wishing you health, happiness, and many downloads. We will see you next time.